Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Gimel, and Mir Hashem today we will be learning Daf Kuf Nun Dalid Amud Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Shabbos. We pick up today 2 lines off the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch on Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis in Siman Shin Chaf Gimel in the middle of Sif Dalid. Our learning today should be a schus for Achenu Kabeis Yisrael Hanesunim Batzara Ubashivya Ha'imdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayabasha Hamakim Yirakim Alehem V'Yitziam Yitzar Lervacha Me'afelu La'iro Mishibud L'Geula Hashta Bagolo V'Zman Kariv and Amar Amen. Our learning should be a schus Refuah Shalema for Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malka Chana, for Yitzchak ben Tzion ben Dusha Chava Adasa Baserel Rivka Bashir Leah. They should be zeichet to have a Refuah Shalema B'Sar Shar Chayla Yisrael. The limud Torah of Klal Yisrael should be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every single member of Klal Yisrael. Doesn't matter what stripe, every single member of Klal Yisrael. B'chol makom shehem. So, here in Shin Chaf Gimel Sif Dalet, we have been discussing how somebody might be able to procure what he needs for use on Shabbos. He's making a Suda, he wants to have different foods, he's short of something, he wants to be able to go to a vendor, and he wants to be able to procure what he needs for his Shabbos meal. Now, as we've mentioned previously, you often come up against 2 Isurim. Today we're really going to be dealing with 1 Isur, and that is the Isur D'Rabbanan that says that any form of mekach umemkar, engaging in trade of any kind on Shabbos, is Asur. So how are you going to go about procuring what you need? Certainly, the Chazal were not matir straight out mekach umemkar. You can't go to the vendor and purchase whatever it is that you need, but what you're trying to figure out is you want to have a way where you could go to the vendor, you could ask him for what you need, he could give it to you, and then after Shabbos, you'll make a cheshbon after Shabbos, and you'll pay him what you owe him after Shabbos. How could we do that? So the Mechaber, in the beginning of Sif Dalet, said, you could go to a chenveni, so you could go to a vendor, and you could say, Tein li arba beitzim v'chamesh rimoinim. You could use a number. You could go to a vendor, and you could say, I need 4 eggs. I need 5 pomegranates. And then he'll give it to you, and you'll make a cheshbon after Shabbos. Why is this mutter? It's mutter because in this case, there are no optics of mekach umemkar. It does not look like mekach umemkar. You didn't mention a monetary value. You didn't mention a measurement. You didn't mention a weight. You said, I need 4 eggs. Please give me 4 eggs. So it doesn't have the outright appearance of mekach umemkar. When the vendor goes and he counts out the eggs, he takes eggs, 1 egg, 2 eggs, 3 eggs, 4 eggs. That also doesn't look like mekach umemkar. And the Mishnah Berurah explained that doesn't look like a mekach umemkar because this is very common. People do this inside their home all the time. They count out what they need. So there's no appearance here of mekach umemkar, and therefore the Mechaber said this is mutter. However, the Mechaber said you cannot mention a dollar amount. It doesn't have to be dollars, it could be pesos, it doesn't matter. You can't mention a monetary amount. And as the Mishnah Berurah said, what that means is you can't go and say, give me $3 worth of eggs. Because once you mention a monetary amount, now it is muchach, it's apparent and it's clear that what's going on over here is trade. What's going on over here is a business arrangement, and it's clear that you're purchasing. Yeah, no, money is changing hands now. The money is going to change hands later, but clearly you're purchasing on credit. So the Mechaber said you cannot mention a dollar amount. The Mechaber also said you can't mention a midah. You can't mention a weight or a measurement. So you can't go and you can't say, I need a pound of nuts. You could say, could you give me 20 almonds? Could you give me 30 peanuts? You could say. A number, the Mechaber said you could say. But once you go ahead and you mention a pound, that's already the derech of mekach umemkar. Now it has the optics of mekach umemkar. Now it becomes asur. The Mechaber also said that while it's true that you could use a number, you cannot use schum minyan. You can't use a total number. And the Mechaber said that what he means by that is, yes, You could go say, can I have 20 almonds? That you could do. That doesn't have the optics of Mekach or Memkar. But if this is a vendor that you regularly buy almonds from, you can't go to him and say, last week you sold me 50 almonds, so I already owe you for 50 almonds. Give me another 50 almonds, and now I'll owe you for 100 almonds. That you can't do, because now it really looks, smells, and tastes like Mekach or Memkar, so that you cannot do. So that was the Shita of the Mechaber. And to wrap it up, really, in the Shita of the Mechaber, we're dealing with shame dumim. The Mechaber said you cannot mention a dollar amount. You can't say, give me $3 worth. We have dealing with a measurement, midah. You can't say, give me a pound. And then we have minyan. Then we have count. Now, count, the Mechaber made a chilik. By count, the Mechaber said, just to say, give me 3 eggs, just to say, give me 20 nuts, that's okay. When is minyan aser? When it's chum minyan, when it's a total number. When you say, I already owe you for 50, give me another 50, that's when minyan becomes aser. Now we're up to the Ramah, 2 lines off the bottom, Agah. We're going to see that the Ramah disagrees with this Mechaber. The Ramah is more makel than the Mechaber. Says the Ramah, Agah, v'chein b'schum damim. Also, when it comes to monetary value, einoi aser ela b'kahai gavna. It's only aser in a similar case to where the Mechaber said, Schum minyan is aser. Sha'omer, when is it aser, says the Ramah? When you say, Tein li bekach v'kach damim, give me $5 worth of eggs, v'yeh lecha b'yadi kach v'kach. So again, the Mechaber told us that any mention of money is aser. Any mention of money is aser. To go to the vendor and say, give me $3 of eggs, that's aser. You mentioned money, you mentioned damim, it's aser. The Ramah says no. Mentioning money works the same way as the Mechaber says mentioning a count does. When did the Mechaber say mentioning a count is aser? Only if you say, you already gave me 50, now give me another 50, I'll owe you for 100. Says the Ramah, mention of a monetary amount works the same way. You want to go to the vendor and you want to say, please give me $3 worth of eggs? That's mutter, says the Ramah. When is it aser? Only if you go to the vendor and you say, I already owe you for $3 worth of eggs. Please give me another $3 worth of eggs, and now I'll owe you $6 worth of eggs. So the Ramah is being makel. But just to say, give me $3 of eggs, that's mutter. And I'll explain the rationale of the Ramah in a moment. But let's go weiter. V'chein b'schum midah. The Ramah says the same thing would work when you mention measure. The Mechaber said, you go and you say, give me a pound of almonds, that's aser. Once you mentioned midah, once you mentioned a measure, the Mechaber holds that's already aser, because that shmeks of Mekach or Memkar. Says the Ramah, no, dafka b'kahai gavna aser. It's only aser to mention a measure if you tell the vendor, I already owe you for a pound of nuts, please give me another pound of nuts, and now I'll owe you 2 pounds. Ava b'lavachi shari, but if not, it would be mutter. Continues the Ramah. Now, says the Ramah, you'll ask me a kasha. There's a Gemara in Masechtas Beitza on Chavtes Amud Beis, and the Gemara in Masechtas Beitza Chavtes Amud Beis says straight out that to mention a monetary amount is aser. So it sounds very much like the Mechaber, the Gemara in Beitza. Gemara in Beitza says, mention a monetary amount is aser. Says the Mechaber, any mention of a monetary amount, give me $3 worth of eggs, it's aser. Sounds like the Mechaber is coming straight from the Gemara in Beitza. So how does the Ramah say, and by the way, it's not the Ramah's own, the Ramah's bringing it from the Argas Ashri. How does the Argas Ashri say, you can mention money? You could say, give me $3 worth of eggs. It's only aser to say, I already owe you for $3 worth of eggs, give me another $3 worth of eggs, and I'll owe you for $6 worth of eggs. How does the Argas Ashri say that? Explains the Ramah. V'afal gav the aser lahaskir damim klal. even though from a simple reading of the Gemara in Beitza, it sounds like any mention of damim, any mention of a monetary amount is aser. Explains the Ramah, that Gemara in Masechtas Beitza, Hainu b'davar she'ein mekcha yadua. When is that true? That's true when the monetary amount that you're mentioning is not readily understandable how many pieces that is. In other words, you have certain cases where somebody comes and he says, could you please give me $4 worth of eggs? Everybody understands that that means a dozen eggs. Now, if that's true, then the Agas Hashri says we could be matir mentioning the dollar amount. Why? Because remember, what creates Isser over here? What is the Isser that we're dealing with? Like I keep on saying, the Isser that we're dealing with is the optics of Mekach u'Memkar. Mekach u'Memkar is an Isser d'Rabbanan. We don't want anything going on here where there's going to be the optics of Mekach u'Memkar. Therefore, the Agas Hashri says like this. Really, to go ahead and say, could you please give me $4 worth of eggs? If everybody knows that $4 worth of eggs is 12 eggs, then saying, could you please give me $4 of eggs, does not carry necessarily the optics of Mekach u'Memkar. Why? Because it could be the only reason the guy is saying $4 worth of eggs is because that's the way you ask for 12 eggs. Asking for 12 eggs is fine. Asking for 12 eggs is minyan. Even the Mechaber said to ask for 4 eggs is mutter, to ask for 5 eggs is mutter, to ask for 12 eggs is mutter, because that doesn't carry the optics of Mekach u'Memkar. Says the Agas Hashri, if everybody knows that $4 of eggs is 12 eggs, then saying $4 of eggs is the same as saying 12 eggs. All it is a siman. All it is a way of saying, I want 12 eggs. That's all it is. And therefore, to say, give me $4 worth of eggs would be mutter. The only time mentioning the damim is aser is when it automatically means Mekach u'Memkar. So if you say, I already owe you for $4 worth of eggs, give me another $4 worth of eggs, and now I'll owe you for $8 worth of eggs, that's a business transaction. That's aser. But to say, give me $4 worth of eggs, that would be mutter. When does the Gemara in Beitza say you're never allowed to mention a dollar amount? That's when it's not yadua. When saying $4 worth of eggs does not necessarily mean 12 eggs. And now the vendor has to figure out, oh, you want $4 worth of eggs? I have to make a calculation. So $4 worth of eggs, I guess $4 worth of eggs is going to be 9 eggs. So you asked for a very specific dollar amount of eggs. The vendor has to figure out how many eggs that is. Now already it carries the optics of a business transaction, and then it's aser. But when everybody knows that $4 worth of eggs means 12 eggs, so all you're doing by saying $4 worth of eggs is another way of letting the chenveni know that you need 12 eggs, shari, then it would be mutter, unless you go ahead and you do what the Ramah said is aser. I already owe you for $4 worth of eggs. Give me another $4 worth of eggs, and I'll owe you for 8. Even though there are those that are machmir like the position of the Mechaber, the Ramah says it's already widespread the minig to be makel, like the opinion that the Ramah is bringing down, the sheet of the Agas Hashri, the kasvara ha-nizkeres, like this svara, this second opinion that the Ramah brings down. So before we see the Mishnah Berurah, let's just try to spell this out in a very clear way. The Mechaber is very machmir. The Mechaber says you could ask for 4 eggs. You could ask for 5 eggs. Minyan, asking for a number, is mutter. The only time asking for a minyan is aser is if you do schum minyan, if you do a total number. If you say, I already owe you for 4, give me another 4, now I'll owe you for 8. That's aser. What's the difference between the two? The difference is that when you ask for 4 eggs and the vendor counts out 4 eggs and gives it to you, that does not necessarily carry the optics of mekach umemkar, and therefore it's mutter. But to say, I already owe you for 4 eggs, please give me another 4 and I'll owe you for 8, that's mekach umemkar, that's aser. That's minyan. How about midah? Midah, measurement, the Mechaber says, you ask for a pound, you ask for a quart, that's aser. You mention midah. As soon as you mention midah, the Mechaber says, that's mekach umemkar, that's aser. So that's midah. Same thing would be, so we covered minyan, we covered midah. One second. There's damim, midah, and minyan. So we covered minyan, that's the number, and we covered midah, and then there's damim, a dollar amount. The Mechaber holds you cannot mention a dollar amount. You can't say, give me $3 of eggs. Because once you mention a dollar amount, mekach umemkar. So I confused myself. If I confused myself, I might have confused you. Again, there are 3 different factors that we're dealing with here. We're dealing over here with damim, dollar amount, midah, measurement, and minyan, number. Let's do it in that order, because that's the order that the Chavetz Chaim uses in the long biur halacha here, dibur hamaschil mutter loymar, which this is all flowing from. Everything that I'm saying is flowing from this biur halacha. So again, the Mechaber holds that damim, as soon as you mention a dollar amount, you give me $3 worth of eggs, that's it, you're done. That's aser. Because that's mekach umemkar. So you cannot mention a dollar amount. The Mechaber is also very machmer by midah, by measurement. As soon as you say, give me a pound of almonds, you mentioned a measurement, that's it, you're done. That's aser. Because that's mekach umemkar. By minyan, by number, the Mechaber makes a chilik. He says you could ask for 4 eggs, that's not a problem. That's not automatically mekach umemkar. What you can't do is say, please, you already gave me 4 eggs last week. Give me another 4 eggs this week. I'll owe you for 8. That's when it becomes aser. That's the shita of the Mechaber. The Ramah, in the name of the Gas Ashri, is much more makel. The Ramah makes damim and midah the same as minyan, according to the Mechaber. The Ramah says, you want to say, give me $3 worth of eggs? That's okay. Why is it okay? The reason it's okay is because we look at it and we say that the mention of the damim, when you say give me $4 of eggs, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're dealing with mekach umemkar. Why do you mention a dollar amount? Because that's another way of saying give me 12 eggs. Saying give me $4 of eggs is just another way of saying give me a dozen eggs. That's how I express to the chenveni how much I want. But it doesn't mean that I'm making a business deal. Give me $4 of eggs and I'll owe you $4. So the Ramah says a simple mention of dollars, of damim, give me $4 of eggs, is mutter. When is it aser? Oh, I owe you already for $4 worth of eggs. Give me another $4 worth of eggs. I'll owe you for $8 of eggs. That's aser. Same thing is true, says the Ramah, by midah. The Mechaber says, you say, give me a pound of almonds, you're done. The Ramah says, no. Saying give me a pound of almonds is just another way of asking for a certain amount of almonds. When does midah become aser? Only if it's schum midah. I already owe you for a pound, give me another pound, I'll owe you for 2 pounds. That's when it becomes aser. So that's the shita of the Ramah brought down from the Hagas Ashri, and the Ramah says that the minig is to follow the more kuladik opinion of the Hagas Ashri. So now let's see the Mishnah Berurah. It should go very quickly because it's everything that I just said. So if you go back to Kuf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Tezayin, the Ramah said, V'chein b'schum damim. Says the Mishnah Berurah, who polig ala Mechaber. The Ramah is coming to argue on the Mechaber. The Svirale, the Mechaber holds, the Stam Shem damim aser. The Mechaber holds, as soon as you mention a dollar amount, give me $4 of eggs, that's also limidkar. You're not allowed to say that. Why? Because the Mechaber holds that's automatically mekach umemkar. For who is svirale, but the Ramah holds not like that. The Ramah holds like the Hagas Ashri. For who is svirale, the Ramah holds the kemoy b'minyan, just like by minyan. Dafka schum minyan aser. It's only aser when you're totaling up the number. When you say you already gave me 5, give me another 5 and I'll owe you for 10. Uminyan ba'alma shari lemidkar, but just to say give me 5, just to mention a number is mutter. Kein adin l'inyan damim. The Rama holds the same chiluk applies to when you're mentioning a dollar amount. And really what the Rama should have said was, Haga, v'yesh oimrim v'chein b'schum damim. The Rama should have made it clear that he's bringing down a shita that disagrees with the Mechaber. But that's not a kasha because the Rama sometimes does it this way. So too when it comes to mentioning mida, when it comes to mention a measure, it's only aser if you mention schum mida. If you're totaling up what you already owe the chenveni and what you're gonna owe him after what he gives you now. What the Rama wants to say is, dafka schum mida. That's the only time it's aser. When you make a cheshbon with the chenveni, that includes everything he already gave you. When is it also to mention a pound of almonds? When you make a cheshbon with the chenveni, and you say, I already owe you for 1 pound, give me another pound, and I'll owe you for 2 pounds. Because that makes it clear that you're talking mekach umemkar. But to just simply say, give me a pound of almonds, sfira leila hagod, the mutter lemidkar, the Rama holds like the Gaz Ashri, that it's mutter to ask for a pound of almonds. Tahasha hiskim mida, because this that he's mentioning a measurement, hurakli simana ba'alma, that's only giving a siman to the chenveni, lo'idiyah lo'ikama hutzarech, to let him know how many almonds you need. V'loi sheyim dedoi dafka. It's not that you're giving him mekach umemkar instructions, measure out a pound, because I only want to have to pay you for a pound. It's not automatically mekach umemkar. The hard the aser b'gemara beitzach of tesam and beis lahaskishay mida. What are we going to do with the Gemara Masechtas Beitza that says straight out that you're not allowed to mention a measurement? Hainu b'davar sheina oilam regilim limdoi doisa b'mida. That's talking about something where people don't use necessarily the measure, and then they don't know when you tell them. If it's something that's not usually weighed out, so people don't know how many almonds there are in a pound, then you can't make the argument, when he said a pound, he was only letting the chenveni know how many almonds he needs. No. Nobody knows how many almonds there are in a pound. But the Mechaber who doesn't make this chiluk of the Ramah, the Mechaber holds any mention of a measurement, any mention of a weight, any mention of a dollar amount, all aser. The Ramah says, without mentioning the total, without doing a cheshbon and totaling up what you already have from the vendor and what you're getting now, shari, everything is mutter. Mishnah Berurah points out that realize this kula that the Ramah is saying is a kula from the perspective of the purchaser, of the loikeach. The Ramah is being matir that the loikeach is allowed to go to the chenveni and say, give me a pound of almonds. Right? The loikeach is not transgressing, and this is the rabbanon of mekach umemkar, by mentioning a pound, the chanal, like we've explained. The heter lemoicher, and it's a heter for the seller, sheyamuter lemadadai velitnai bekelev shaloikeach mavur le'el b'sefalev sheyosef hayamayit mat. What he's saying is like this: the Ramah just gave a heter where the purchaser can say, give me a pound of almonds. But now we have to look at it from the perspective of the meicher, from the perspective of the chenveni, of the vendor. How is he going to deliver a pound? He can't just straight out measure out a pound, because measuring out a pound would be the isser of medida, right? That would be the isser d'Rabbanan of measuring. So how is he going to do the medida? The answer is, like we learned earlier, what he'll have to do is, he'll have to go a little bit over the weight or a little bit under the weight and not weigh precisely. Because if he weighs precisely, again, you're going to come up against the Yisad Rabbanon of medida, which may be because of Mekach Memkar, Ksiva, etc., etc. Okay, I cut your test. Now the Ramah said, "V'afagav the aser." Even though we have the Gemara Masechtas Beitza that says straight out that mentioning a dollar amount is aser. Chayzer atchilas hagah. This is going back. This is explaining the very beginning of what the Ramah said in this hagah. The Ka'amar, and he's saying the had the kaimelon the aser lahaskir damim klal. This that we paskin like the Gemara Masechtas Beitza that you're never allowed to mention a dollar amount. Hu b'davar she'ein mekcha yadua. That's only talking about where nobody could readily identify $4 worth with a number of pieces. Where there's not a known price. So you say $4 of eggs, nobody knows how many eggs that is. So if nobody knows how many eggs $4 of eggs is, you can't make the argument that by saying $4 of eggs, the purchaser is only giving a siman to the vendor to know how much to give him. You can't make an argument that this is not derech mekach umemkar. Why else is he saying $4 worth of eggs? Clearly he's saying $4 worth of eggs because he's making a business transaction and he's saying, give me $4 worth of eggs and I'll pay you $4 on Sunday. If it's yadua, if everybody knows that $4 of eggs is 12 eggs, so then you can make an argument. No, it's just a siman ba'alma. I mean, give me 12 eggs. But if it's not Yadua, you can't make that argument. But something where everybody understands the purchasing price. Amrinan, we say, when he said $4, he only meant it as a siman. To let him know how many he needs. So now we don't have clear mention of mekachu memkar, ela nesina ba'alma kama yitain. Ois cut and chaf. The Ramah said, Kfar Pashat HaMinig, the minig is already widespread, the Ramah said, to be makel like the Ramah. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'hine yesh kama achrayim shesarvin sheyesh lizar medina shalol lahaski shem damim. The Mishnah Berurah says there are many achrayim who disagree with this Ramah, and they say we should be very careful never to mention a monetary value. Not to be makel like the Ramah, but rather to be machmir like the mechaber, and never say, give me $4 worth of eggs, even if everybody knows what $4 worth of eggs means. And certainly to mention a measure, to say, give me a pound, is always aser. Ukedas ha-mechaber. Nevertheless, we can't object to people who are noyig to be makel, because they have a Ramah to be Samechan. Aval, the Mishnah Berurah rules that it is proper to be machmir, that we should never mention a measure or of dollar amount. Certainly we should be machmir because it's very easy to do this in an oifen shel heter. Why should we be makel like the Ramah and do something that might be also according to the mechaber, if we could very easily accomplish our goal ba'ofen shel heter? We don't have to come on to measuring a weight. Bring a container, give it to the vendor, like we learned in Sif Aleph, please fill up this keli for me, and we'll measure it tomorrow, and we'll know what I owe you. And if it's something where you could use a number, and you could say, please give me 6 eggs, so then use a number, which the Mechaber said is mutter, and the Ramah certainly agrees. And don't mention a dollar amount. And then don't make a cheshbon with the vendor until the day after, until Sunday. This minig that some vendors had, says the Mishnah Berurah, where they would take a notebook and they would write down on Erev Shabbos, Ploini hiniach kach v'kach mois, Ruvain deposited a certain amount of money with me. So you have the grocery store, right? So Ruvain goes into the grocery store on Erev Shabbos and gives him $10. Okay, the grocer opens up the notebook and he writes, Ruvain deposited $10. So now Ruvain has $10 credit. Uploini kach v'kach. And Shimon came in and Shimon gave $20. So Shimon has $20 credit. Okay. Ulamacher b'Shabbos. And then the next day on Shabbos, Kishanois and Hayayin, when the vendor, now it's Shabbos. Now Ruvain comes in and he says, I need 2 cups of wine. Okay, Ruvain has $10 credit. He deposited $10 with the grocer on Erev Shabbos. He has $10 credit. Now on Shabbos, he comes in and he says, please give me 2 cups of wine. Okay. Now the vendor takes a needle, and he makes holes in the paper of the notebook, equaling the number of units of wine that the purchaser purchased. So again, Reuven came in on every Shabbos, deposited $10 with the vendor. It's $2 a cup for a cup of wine. Now, Shabbos, Reuven comes in and says, please give me 2 cups of wine. The vendor takes a needle and he pokes 2 holes into the paper next to Reuven's name. That's a siman that Reuven took 2 cups. So, what does Reuven owe? $4. $2 a cup. He took 2 cups. He owes $4. He doesn't owe anything because he had $10 credit. Now he's only going to have $6 credit. So in order to keep the cheshbon, the deposit was made before Shabbos. The vendor makes marks on Shabbos to make the cheshbon. Says the Mishnah Berurah, also lasis kain, it's also to do this. Now it's very interesting. Why is it also? Where's the Isser over here? There's no Isser in Reuven making a deposit on Erev Shabbos. On Shabbos, all Reuven said was, please give me wine. Now, okay, he said 2 cups. Well, according to the Ramah, it's mutter to say, give me 2 cups. Even though you're mentioning a midah, but according to the Ramah, the only thing that's also is schum midah. It would only be also if you say, I already owe you for 2 cups, give me another 2 cups. But if you say, give me 2 cups, according to the Ramah, that's mutter. All right, what's the chenveni doing? The chenveni is poking holes in the notebook. Is that also? Well, says the Mishnah Berurah, it's also lasis kain. Why? Says the Mishnah Berurah, to ha'aser lehistakel ba'oisik sav shekasa b'yischom amois. Because the vendor is not allowed to open the notebook and read where it says in the notebook that Reuven made a deposit of $10 on Erev Shabbos. They have shtari hadyotais. Because that's shtari hadyotais 101. You're reading a business document. That's what it is, right? What is this notebook that says that Reuven deposited $10? It's a business notebook. That's Shtori Hadyotais 101. You're not allowed to read it. That's also. Gam asiyas hanikavim baniyar gam kein einachan lechatchila. And poking the holes with a needle in the notebook, that's also also lechatchila. It may be an issa d'Rabbanan. Why? It could be an issa d'Rabbanan mishum kaisev. Even though you're not writing anything, but you're making an impression and you're making a mark that is intended to be a siman that means something. Those marks that you're making mean, you made 2 marks on the paper, it means 2 cups of wine. That could be an isser of kaisev, definitely kaisev d'Rabbanan. So says the Mishnah Berurah, this is aser. V'uadin, the same halacha would be, the aser lichtov b'piskos, you're not allowed to write out tickets, may Erev Shabbos, on Erev Shabbos, schum mois. The vendor wants to be prepared. He knows that a lot of people come on Shabbos to buy wine. Now, one guy is going to come and he's going to buy 2 cups of wine. He's going to owe $4. Another guy is going to come. He's going to buy 1 cup of wine. He's going to owe $2. Another guy is going to come. He's going to buy 3 cups of wine. He's going to owe $6. How am I going to keep cheshbon? So this very smart vendor comes up with a cute chap. He prepares before Shabbos a whole bunch of tickets. He has $2 tickets, $4 tickets, $6 tickets, $8 tickets. He has a whole box full of tickets. Reuven comes in and buys 2 cups of wine. That's $4. He takes out a $4 ticket and he puts it next to Reuven's name in the notebook. Maybe he puts it on with a paper clip. So now by Reuven, there's a $4 ticket. On Sunday, he knows Reuven owes $4. Shimon comes in, wants 1 cup of wine. He takes a $2 ticket. He puts a $2 ticket next to Shimon's name. Says the Mishnah Berurah, aser. V'huadin the aser lichtayv b'piskais b'erev Shabbos chomois. You're not allowed to write out a monetary amount on a ticket from Erev Shabbos. Ulamachar b'Shabbos, and then the next day on Shabbos, kishalokech hayayin, when the people come in to buy wine, maniach hamoicher es hapiska, the vendor will take the ticket b'makom sheshema ish kasav etzlai b'kvar, and he'll put it next to Reuven's name in the notebook, Shimon's name in the notebook. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is aser. Again, the aser likrais papiska is halal v'chanal, because you're not allowed to read the tickets. The ticket is a business document. It says $2 on it. What does it represent? That Reuven is going to owe $2. So that ticket is shtari hadyotis. You're not allowed to read it. And you have to read it. You're pulling out, you got to put the right ticket next to the right name. So you need a $2 ticket. You're going to read the ticket, $2 ticket. You're reading Shtari Hadyotis. It's also. V'lachein, and therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, the vendors came up with a cute chap of how to do this on Shabbos. V'lachein, noagu, therefore the minhag became, litein garin, to put a seed, oishar davar, or something else that's not muksa, al shem ha'ish l'simin. So here's what you do. You take garinim, you take a box of sunflower seeds, and if Reuven buys 1 cup of wine, you put 1 sunflower seed next to his name. If he buys 2, you put 2 sunflower seeds next to his name. The sunflower is not shtari hadyotos. And it's not like you're making a mark on a paper that should be an isser of kaisev. And the garinim are not muktzah because they're food. So they're not muktzah. So you have no problem here. Another interesting case, says the Mishnah Berurah, V'gaboy tztaka, the gaborim of tztaka. Efsher demutarin bepiskais litein al shema ish lizikarin. What if the gabbai tztaka, people are making a Mishnah Berurah on Shabbos, and they give $18 to the shul, and $18 to the rav, and $18 to the Gemilas Chasadim fund by the Mishnah Berurah. The gabbai has to keep track of this stuff because he has to be able to go and follow up with the guy during the week and say, remember, you owe me for the Mishnah Berurah, $18 for the shul, $18 for the gemach, and $18 for the rav. How's he going to keep cheshbon? Oh, so he'll do the shtick with the tickets. He'll have $18 tickets and $10 tickets and $54 tickets and $180 tickets. And when Reuven has an aliyah and gives him Mishnah Berurah and gives $180 to the shul, he'll take a $180 ticket and put it next to Reuven's name. Says the Mishnah Berurah, even though we said that for the vendor to do this for cups of wine is also because of Shtari Hadyotos, but for the Gabbai Tzedakah to do this, it might be mutter. Why are Shtari Hadyotos aser? Why are you not allowed to read Shtari Hadyotos? So we discussed this in Siman Shin Vav. We saw 2 different reasons. One reason was because we darshan from the pasuk Mimtzoi Cheftzecha V'daber Davar. You're not allowed to pursue your own business pursuits. Reading Shtari Hadyotos is being over on Mimtzai Cheftzecha. But we say, Cheftzecha Asurin. Your pursuits are Asur, Cheftzei Shamayim are Mutarin. The Gabbai Tzedakah is pursuing Cheftzei Shamayim, not Chafotzecha. And therefore, that would be potentially mutter, says the Mishnah Berurah. But again, if the Gabbai Tzedakah could use the eitzah of the garinim, he should use that. He should not come on to this. V'chein nohagu hakadmoinim. Moving along to Sif Hey, a very interesting halacha. 3 lines down in the Mechaber Sif Hey, says the Mechaber, Hamevi kadeyayin mimokoim lamokoim. Somebody has a need to transport jugs of wine on Shabbos. So maybe they're having a kiddush in shul, and the jugs of wine were delivered to the shamish's house, not to the shul. And the shamish has to transport a whole bunch of jugs of wine from his house to the shul on Shabbos. Okay? Says the Mechaber, Hamevi kadiyayin mimakom l'makom. If somebody's transporting a large number of jugs of wine from place to place on Shabbos, lo yeviem basal, he should not bring them in a basket, ubakupa, or in a box, kederech choil, the way he would during the week. In other words, the guy has to transport 6 big bottles of wine. Okay, how do you transport 6, the big bottles, the 1.5s, not the 750s? You want to take 6 big bottles of Concord grape, from the house to the shul. So what do? 6 big bottles is a case. So you fill up a case of wine, and you take the box, and you take the case, and you schlep the case to the shul. Says the Mechaber, no, you can't do that. Why? Because that's kederech choil. That's the way you transport merchandise during the week. And now on Shabbos, it looks like you're transporting merchandise. What are you doing transporting merchandise on Shabbos? Is this Mekach Memkar going on over here? What is this going on over here that you're transporting merchandise? So you're not allowed to do that. You can't bring them in a basket or a box the way you would during the week. Ella rather, you have to carry them in your hand, in front of you. Or or on your shoulder, or in some similar manner. Now, the Mishnah Berurah points out right away, it's not the Mechaber is not saying you have to transport 6 bottles of wine. Don't transport the 6 bottles of wine in a box. Instead, take the 6 bottles of wine out of the box and schlep them in front of you like this. No, to transport 6 bottles of wine at a time is already a problem, because transporting such a large amount of merchandise is already problematic because it looks like mekach umemkar. When the Mechaber says that you have to do it b'fanav, you have to do your hands in front of you, or on your shoulder, he means take 1 or 2 in your hand. In other words, why did you want to use a box? Because a box is what allows you to carry 6. Says the Mechaber, no, you can't do that. You can't transport 6 in a box or out of a box, because that looks like mekach umemkar. You could take 1 or 2. Now, you're going to have to make 3 trips. If you want to move 6 bottles, you're going to have to make 3 trips. Take 2 bottles in front of you, go to shul, go back home, get another 2 bottles. So you're going to do more tircha. You're going to schlep more on Shabbos. But the optics of mekach umemkar, that's going to be mitigated. Okay, so again, so the Mechaber said, "Hamevi kadi yain mimakom lamakom." You're transporting jugs of wine from place to place. Lo yaviyim b'sala b'kupa b'gederach chayil. Do not transport them in a basket or a box the way you would during the week. Ela yaviyim lefanav. Rather carry them in your hand in front of you, ayal ksefai, or on your shoulder, v'kiyotza b'zeh, or in another similar manner. Sheyishanem derech chayil. You have to change from the way you do it during the week. Afilu ein bashinui kalus b'masa. Even though by making the shinoi, you're not going to make the schlepping less. So what the Mechaber is saying is, this that I'm telling you to make a shinoi is not because I'm trying to lessen the tircha. No, it's because of the optics of mekach umemkar. So you must make a shinoi in order to mitigate the optics of mekach umemkar, even though making that shinoi is not going to make it easier for you. It's going to make it harder. Now, if for some reason you can't do it with a shinoi, kigoin, for example, shezimein orchem harbe. You invited a lot of guests to your house, and the Suda was supposed to start already 15 minutes ago, and everybody's sitting and waiting, and you can't do a shinoi, because if you're going to make a shinoi, you're going to have to make 3 trips, and everybody's going to sit and wait, and they're going to be sitting hungry and hot and tired and thirsty until you could come home and make kiddush. So in that case, mutter, then you could do it in a box or in a basket the way you would do it during the week. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Cotton Chaf Aleph, Lo Yeviem, Litain Shloishav Arba Kadim Besat Kupa Lisoim. You can't take 3 or 4 jugs and put them in a box and carry them in a box. Why? Mishum Denera Kemaisa Dechoil Loseis Masois. Because this is Uvdin Dechoil, it has optics of Mekach Umemkar, it has optics of dealing with merchandise and transporting merchandise. This is Osir. Ois Kalachaf Beis, rather you have to carry them Lefonov, Biyada. You have to carry them in your hand, not in a box. Chav Gimel Oyak Seifai, or on your shoulder. Echad Oishnayim, 1 or 2 at a time. Demuchach de L'Tzareh Shabbos. When somebody sees you carrying 2 bottles of wine, they understand it's Shabbos. You need wine. You're going to the Kiddush. You're going to bring home wine for the guests. They understand it's L'Tzareh Shabbos. When they see you carrying a case of wine, that looks like merchandise. That doesn't look like this is L'Tzareh Shabbos. Or you have to make some other type of shinoi. The language of the Torah is a little bit different than the language of the Shulchan Aruch here. The Shulchan Aruch says, or in a similar fashion, you have to make a shinoi from the way you do it during the week. The Torah is a little bit, a slightly different lashon, which sounds a lot more precise. The Torah says, "V'chein kol kayotza bazeh," or anything similar, yeshana miderech chayil. Anything else. This is not a halacha that's specific to jugs of wine. It could be a halacha that's specific to challah rolls too. It doesn't have to be only kadiyayin. You always have to make a shinoi. V'zeh lashon b'sukin yoiser. Okay, so that was the first opinion of the Mechaber. So the first opinion of the Mechaber here in Sif Hey is you're trying to transport a large number of items, a significant amount of items on Shabbos. You got to do it with a shinoi. You have to make sure it doesn't look like uvdin dechoil, even if you're making life harder for yourself. This is the critical point. According to the first opinion, even if you're going to end up with a tercha yisera, even though you're going to end up exerting yourself more, because if you could take one case of 6 bottles of wine, you're going to make 1 trip from the house to the shul. But if you have to take 2 bottles at a time, you're going to make 3 trips from the house to the shul. So you're going to have more tircha. So in the first opinion of the Mechaber holds that it is more important to be memayit in the masa. It's more important to lessen the amount that you're carrying. That's more important than lessening the hiluch, than lessening the amount of trips you make. The tircha, because there's a double-edged sword here. Tircha Yisera is also a problem on Shabbos. But the first opinion holds it's better to have tircha Yisera and make more trips than to have the optics of Mekach Memkar and have riboy masa, to be carrying a lot at one time. That's the first opinion. Second opinion, but there's a Yesharim that says, the next opinion says the opposite. It's more important to lessen the amount of trips that you make. It's more important to lessen the Terchi Yisera. And therefore, and this opinion would hold that it's better to carry more jugs in a box or in a basket in one shot. That's better than carrying one piece at a time and having to make more trips. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Chavei. There are those that say that it is more important to lessen the amount of trips you make. Okay, so the Mechaber gave us 2 opinions here. But the Mechaber didn't tell us which way to go. The Mechaber gave us 2 opinions. First opinion, can't carry a lot of merchandise. Optics of Mekach Memkar. Uvdin Dechoil. You're going to have to make more trips? Too bad. Terchi Yisera, make more trips. The optics of Mekach Memkar are worse than Terchi Yisera. Second opinion, no. Make 1 trip. It looks like Mekach Memkar. Yeah, but that's better than Terchi Yisera. What do we do with this? Says the Mishnah Berurah Kol Chafei, Ayin Siman Tov Yotzev Ches Ba'Haga, the Pasak Kahayesh Omrim Elu. The Mechaber over there paskins like the Yesh Omrim and says that it is better to have less tircha and to have more the optics of Mekach Memkar. But, says the Mishnah Berurah, the Chol Zeh B'Makom She'ein Royin. But that's only true if what you're doing is relatively discreet and people aren't really going to be seeing it. But if you're carrying it in the street because you have an Erev, so you're going out into the Rishus, I don't want to call it Rishus Harabim because we don't make an Erev on a real Rishus Harabim, but you're going out into the street and Shchichi Barabim, people are going to see you walking in the street carrying the cases of wine. V'av shemil setuva, it's going to be very public that you're walking in the street carrying cases of wine. V'yamir d'letzar chayil maviyam, and it's going to look to people like uvdin d'chayil. It's going to look like you're engaging in trade. It's going to look like mekach u'memkar. L'kulei alma l'mayit b'masa adif. Everybody would agree, carry less at a time and make more trips. Okay, even though we're going a little bit over. You know what? No, we could stop over here. Tomorrow's page is relatively short, so we're going to pause over here, and we'll stop. We'll continue next time with Zevav. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rabban Shalom should send Yeshuas and for us Parnasa Sheduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Kol Tzedek. B'mehera v'yameinu Amen. Be well.